Did you have anybody who hadn't built this thing try and do it and decide it was a fun experience? If I was to describe the Twisted Castle to you, it's a series of labyrinths and teleporters and rooms to click buttons. And button 1 opens something over there, and button 2 opens something over there.
That's me.
And you got to divide the
It was fun. Anyway, I'm going to watch this one. My first raid in Guild Wars 2 was a revelation. I have no idea if he has a positive outlook on raids or a negative outlook on raids, because freaking Preach has a tendency to switch over his titles and his thumbnails, you know, like every hour.
In we stepped. I managed to assemble a team of 10 people who had never
I get
done
the Avengers reference
before.
now.
Some of them were old school Guild Wars players who simply have never raided.
Man,
and many
those
of them
were the good old
players who
days,
made
back
new
when Marvel
characters
movies
along
used to
with
be
me
good.
And were ready to step inside. So into the jungle we stepped, not knowing what to find. They did the age-old, very safe bet. They gave us the bosses to fight as trash, and then we would fight all of them individually. These 3 bosses, green, blue, and red. We sort of walked through them and just smashed them to pieces, but the red one, this exposed 2 things. 1, we have no idea what we're doing, and group comp is very, very important in Guild Wars 2.
I love this raid.
It's basically the reverse.
The very
of what
first
Blizzard's
raid
done
is
in the
one of my
past with
favorite
trying to do
raids.
the bring the player, not the class thing. It's very, very important because we couldn't damage this thing. It took us 10 minutes on the trash mob to figure out what to do with this ad. We were dragging it everywhere.
That's good.
That's
fine.
Damage reduction on it.
That doesn't sound bad.
We dragged it into pools.
10 minutes on a trash ad?
Theory crafting out of their minds as to what we're supposed to do here.
Good. I would rather have, you know, trash ads that require you to think and figure out the mechanics for than having actual trash ads where you're just, you know, mindlessly, you know, chopping through.
But we did
WoW and Final Fantasy have a lot of that.
People could do some damage.
They're
One of the
not.
cool things I was hoping for was no trash, the way Final Fantasy XIV has gone in its design. And the fact that the trash of Boss 1 was the bosses themselves, that was something I was kind of excited about.
They were pretty much like boss fights,
remember,
a little
Guild Wars
bit.
2 had a lot of the WoW dev team that moved from WoW on to create it, so they like a bit of trash, and goddamn, how do they do trash in Guild Wars? It's a horde mode. Oh, man. What a bummer. And then they mixed in this mini jumping puzzle.
Not in the first raid. The first raid, they have, you know, mechanics. They actually, you know, again, they put more thought into that.
Other big MMOs out there via trash design. This is awful, Arena. If you're watching, this is terrible. Like, nerf this now.
Bro, this was not hard.
Like, nerf it now. This is terrible. Stay tuned. It gets really
bad. That encounter was not hard at all.
We eventually got there, and this was great. This was actually showing some Guild Wars 2 muscle. This is the beginning of them starting to mix in some stuff that they can do uniquely. And in this time, it was breaking through walls and then diving out and using.
There's nothing wrong with Spirit Run.
You learned with this expansion in order to float around outside the arena while the floor exploded to get back in. Now, this was a big DPS check boss for us. I mentioned our lack of...
I find that very odd that Preach didn't, you know, understand that the trash existed to train players on coming mechanics, because this is something, you know, that Final Fantasy XIV heavily trains its players on, is that, you know, they slowly introduce mechanics to you one way or the other.
And this will be remembered fondly as one of my favorite bosses we did in the entire raid wing, as it was a good learning curve for maximizing uptime, doing things.
Gorseval was so
still
fun.
Not really understanding why we were doing like a third of the potential damage our characters can do. The fight is very reminiscent of a World of Warcraft fight. Now, I hate to suggest that World of Warcraft
it kind of is
inspired by Guild Wars 2, because that's definitely not the case. I'd have to actually check the years the content came out, but this fight is eerily similar to a World of Warcraft fight.
Yeah.
Creepily similar.
Most of the raids are very WoW-esque.
Iron Maidens. We're going to get to see how they developed over time their ideas, because they could listen to feedback, they could come back, which meant for me, Raid Wings 2, 3, and 4 were going to be very exciting to see how ArenaNet started to branch in its own thing. So let's jump into Wing 2. Team assembled.
Wing 2 was
into Raid Wing 2 we
significantly
went.
less fun.
And this is the first sign of the difficulty curve of Guild Wars 2 raids being a bit
I
of a
hated
rollercoaster.
Slothosaur.
The first boss,
I
this
thought
was a
Slothosaur
big,
sucked.
giant sloth creature, was easily the hardest we did this raid wing, and the best, in my opinion. I
Really?
loved this boss so much.
Really?
It involved a cycle of people.
I
lot of
hated it.
teamwork, of
It
turning
was-
into a worm, clearing a pathway.
It is visual noise. It is regurgitated, pixels. So much regurgitated pixels.
Simultaneously,
It was
the raid
annoying. It was
dragging
frustrating.
The boss through the new
More
safe
than it was
area,
fun.
clearing this poison for everybody else, and constantly nuking it down while the boss.
And it
gained
was
extra mechanics.
110%
Oh,
a
you could say
World
this
of
is like a
Warcraft
Globulus
fight. So
copy
that,
from Naxxramas, but really-
because it, is very reminiscent of that, it made me biased against that fight.
Really, it was done in such a much better, much more interesting way that it felt very Guild Wars and not similar to Sabbather where they ripped it off from someone else. This was a great kill. We had to.
What do you mean? What do you mean? Slothosaur was absolutely a World of Warcraft inspired fight.
In all of our raiders who were looking forward to a good end
Yeah,
boss
it was a
like
pretty
we
meh
had with
boss.
Sabbather in
The
Raid
overall
1.
raid was
And it also
just
felt
very
strange
bland
considering the hour or so we had put
and
into
disappointing.
Slothosaur. We had two-shot a fort campaign, which we were all pretty bored in, and then
Which made me a little sad because I had
less
such a
a
good time with Raid
deflating
1,
final
and
boss to
then
go into this
I was
raid
expecting Raid
Again,
2
this
to be
mix-up
even
and
better.
Still,
That
I
was
would
the
say
exact opposite.
Finding the niche for Guild Wars was being mixed and mashed.
Because if you're going to spend the time and the resources and the money to create something like a big raid, you need the players to take part in it. And so far, that's not happening. So their big solution to get people in, was an escort quest. I'm not joking. The
Yeah?
first boss is an escort quest. I was
He doesn't like it.
gobsmacked when this first happened. And it's not only that, but you need
I
certain
thought it was-
masteries to get
I thought it
through
was
and
good.
You have to wait, and it's annoying, and it's frustrating. You have to babysit an NPC, and I have no idea how this happened. But I hate it, and I never want to do it again.
I don't know if me
This
and
is the
Preach can
worst
ever see eye
escort
to
in
eye.
history. This is a very interesting choice by ArenaNet. Like, okay.
I thought it was
and I
alright.
kind of feel
It is a
they-
little
just
fiddly.
because they wanted
It is a little
make
fiddly
people
to get,
the
the NPC to follow,
Can
you
believe
exactly.
They started the new raid with an escort mission? That's crazy. The Construct. God damn, this was great. This is
That
the
was
first
yep.
time ever in a raid
Good
I've
fight.
seen a boss that does different mechanics if you don't do one of them correctly. This was incredible.
I'm
was
proud that
cool.
I got
However, the boss
to,
just stopped doing
figure
its own
this first
mechanics until
mechanic
we
out
figured that
myself.
out. So we wiped.
I don't
got
often do
planned
that,
out as to
but I
what
was
we
able
were
to figure this
supposed to
out.
do, came back in, immediately did
I
it
think I
correctly
did.
as we would Zerg one of my favorite fights in the
Well,
entire raid
hold on.
series of
Well,
all
the
13.
reason what makes the raids, perceived as very hard is just, how players are picking up the mechanics intuitively, and not that many pick up the mechanics intuitively in Guild Wars 2. At least the early raids. It's not until the End of Dragons fights they learned a lot of lessons, and they started, picking up on, what they need to do to display the right amount of information to their players.
Find is where you
I
seize
imagine
this
the reason why it's like that. Sorry if I'm pausing the video too many times. Sky brings up an interesting point. The mainstream raiders, the ones that people see putting up LFGs, don't want anything other than top DPS, clear, skip mechanics, and kill proof stuff. Is very much the same reasons as to why people do that in World of Warcraft raiding. Is because there are some logistical problems in the way that people just don't want to deal with, and so if they can remove as much friction as they can, then they will, and they are encouraged to do that sort of degenerative gameplay, as in getting the top DPS classes, using meta comp builds, etc., etc. Same reason for gatekeeping in Final Fantasy XIV also. Only when you're doing Savage and Ultimates. You see that you see that sort of toxicity when you look at Savage Raiders and Ultimate Raiders. But if you look at normal Raiders and Extreme Raiders in Final Fantasy, then it's pretty chill. But right around, for World of Warcraft and Guild Wars 2, you see that toxicity just all around. Albeit less concentrated in Guild Wars 2 because there are less logistical problems with Guild Wars 2. In World of Warcraft, you have to freaking deal with respawning trash mobs. You have to walk back from the entrance to a certain boss arena every single time, almost every single time. you have to spend 10 to 15 minutes, rebuffing and getting everything in order to do another attempt at the same encounter. It gets really damn crazy there.
And
oh, there it is,
look
the
at me
Twisted
in the eye,
Castle.
reading it. Did you have anybody who hadn't built this thing try and do it and decide it was a fun experience? If I was to describe the Twisted Castle to you, it's a series of labyrinths and teleporters and rooms to click buttons. And
Me.
button 1 opens
That's
something
me.
over there, and button 2
That's me.
opens something over
That's
there.
me.
And you got to divide the
It was
group. You gotta
fun.
go in different areas.
It was
You gotta
great.
Go in different directions. Not only that, it mixes it with weeping angels. If you don't look at them, then they
That was
chase you
awesome.
down and they kill you. They have a giant statue in
Good.
the room, which we didn't even know about. At the time,
Interesting.
that if you're looking at it, drives you insane, putting a time limit on our team to complete this.
Yeah.
Not only that, they decided to put invisible platforms in there. So your whole raid team is running across a stone floor,
Yeah.
and then suddenly they all fall to their deaths.
All right, so he has a very, very competitive mindset, and this is what upsets me about a lot of competitive gamers. They are looking at the end goal. They are looking at the medal. They are looking at the extrinsic rewards only. They are not intrinsically motivated gamers. They don't care about the intrinsic motivation to, just play the video game. Just be there for the journey rather than the destination. I disagree.
Oh, god damn it!
That's funny.
Now for the final boss, and
That was really fun.
Not ready, as one of the strengths of Guild Wars 2, one of its most powerful strengths that it has over any of the other MMOs we've played.
This is a great fight too. This
its
is my
animations.
favorite
Its
raid boss
animations,
fight,
even when
maybe?
the enemies are
Yeah,
on
it
such
is.
a grand scale.
I
are
love Zero.
Absolutely perfect.
This kind of reminds me, for the Final Fantasy folk in chat, it kind of reminds me of Sadolphos in that one raid. Oh man, but Sadolphos.
Oh, she's got no health. Okay, we win. Oh, shit! We Final Fantasy! And the biggest killer on this fight, which again created a lot of laughs and definitely some frustration along the way,
The jumping
was
puzzle.
simply jumping between
Yeah.
platforms.
Yep.
During its intermission phase, where you have to click things and just jump between the 6 platforms, people just not hitting it, falling to their deaths, including me sometimes, because
It's the biggest
sometimes
killer.
you bugged,
I
sometimes
find that
it didn't lift you
hilarious.
up high enough. Sometimes you just were crap. All those kind of things were what went on here, which were fun. Super fun. It's like, oh my god, we lost another one. And it also punished you very heavily.
Zero's
which
good
is the
design,
thing
but
I'm
you
gonna
can
introduce
get boring
later
when
on.
you're clearing for the
This
100th time.
is
Well, that's with every
probably my
fight.
favorite
Every
fight
fight gets
that we
boring
did
after,
throughout the
clearing it
entire
100
raid.
times.
I would rate Zero really high at number 1 or 2. In order to do this fight, you have to have a level 5 mastery. Now,
Oh,
that took me about 2
yeah,
days
the
to
ley
farm
lines,
out.
right?
Thankfully, I got the warnings like, hey, you cannot do Raid Wing 3 without having
Yeah,
this mastery. So it did put
that
a bit
is
of
a
break
bummer.
into our progress while we had all the players
That's why they
go and
stopped
grind this
doing
thing
that,
out
right?
again. About 2 days, and also gave us that opportunity to find the efficient ways of grinding out these masteries. I'm never a big fan of mandatory grinds in order to do the content you want to do. Definitely Erode World of Warcraft went on for a while, and it wasn't a big fan. Thankfully, that is now removed in Dragonflight. Yet still, this was a little bit of a red flag to, okay, are they going to repeat this? Is this going to be a Raid Wing 4 kind of thing?
Well, there's no...
So let's go and find out. We're entering the final
Nothing
raid
wrong
ring.
if there is a raid that's just basically, consecutive fights like that. If it's like that, that's fine. But I'm saying that those encounters are still good.
Now begun our project into Destiny 2 to complete their raids. They're doing the same thing!
The
Oh
chest
my
fight?
god, stop pissing about and just get rid of the trash. Praise be to FF14 for realizing that. Anyway, this one involves...
Say that again, Preach.
Stop pissing about and just get rid of the trash. Praise be to FF14 for realizing that.
Praise be to Final Fantasy XIV for getting rid of trash? Yeah, sure, if you're, doing the new raids. If you're doing raids. Not the Alliance raids. Not the dungeons. Those trash mobs still suck ass. I can't tell you how fucking bored I am of doing dungeons in Final Fantasy XIV. Alright, you just do the boss, and then you just mindlessly go down a hallway, a corridor of brainless mobs, mow them down with AoEs. There's like usually 4 mobs, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. Yeah, sure. No, they have not gotten rid of the trash mobs.
Around the raid.
To be fair,
in
he's
order
talking
to
about
find
raids, I think,
keys
so.
located to open a door.
I'm talking about in general.
It took us like 15 minutes. It is what it is. It was a DPS zerg. Every
It's okay.
raid seems to have one at some point. We've got to have that
It wasn't a bad
patchwork
fight.
style thing, and this was that one. And
It's not going to set the world on fire, but, you know, I thought it was interesting.
Boy, what was up next?
Samurag!
Samurag.
Oh,
Another
Samurag's
difficult
so
fight.
good.
Big beastly encounter. Stand
Oh.
behind it, DPS it, kill some spears that fall on the floor. But it's
Samurag was
intermission
great.
phase. Okay, look. I don't know if you're a seasoned Guild Wars 2 player, but I don't believe so that this mechanic makes sense to you, but actually just get lost. It sucks. This
Which one?
was splitting the boss. The boss, like, retreats and puts a big red shield over itself and spawns two ads, different ads that have a red shield themselves, and they can't be killed. So clearly we have to do something in this arena to break this shield. And it's not in any way
Tinder
obvious.
mechanics, right.
It's not in any way makes any sense. There's also visual bugs, which are really misleading as to what you're supposed to do. We have a big brawly guy, and we have a little weak guy.
I can't remember. To be fair, I can't remember if
if
this
figure out what to do. Now, obvious
this mechanic
implication
was
using
intuitive
all our
or not.
raid knowledge. Yes, we are blind to Guild Wars 2 raiding, but we're raiders from FF. We're
You guys
raiders
know
from
how I
WoW. We've
raid.
got
You
some
know, I
raid
do
knowledge.
the first few
Separate
pulls
them,
blind,
bring
and
them
then
together.
I'll
Maybe
get
we
an
haven't
explanation
separated them
afterwards.
enough. Drop them into the spears that are dropping out the floor to break the shields. If you're going to do a mechanic like this, the debuffs and buffs on the mobs should give some sort of clue as to what you're supposed to do. Because it just gets frustrating. I understand
I agree with that.
the lust and the desire for a puzzle in a fight, but that puzzle should have clues. All good puzzles have clues. Sudoku has clues, right? All these things have clues as to how you're supposed to figure things out.
And that's why, you know, I continue to gush over the first raid, because it is literally littered in clues for all its bosses. You know, they'll give you clues for the mechanics with its trash mobs.
Died the next pull. After that, a monstrous body appeared. Of
I
the
think this
real
is an okay
Deimos,
fight.
and into the
I
real fight
didn't
we
enjoy
got,
it as
which
much as
was
Samurag.
Very cool. This fight involved us, and I'm going to give a more mechanical breakdown.
I
here.
think, you
This fight
know,
involved
when the
us
boss
having
goes
two
big
things to
mode,
deal with,
that
which
was
most
like
raiders who are
probably the
seasoned
coolest
raiders
part
hate:
about this
global
raid.
timers and phase timers. A global
My
timer
problem is
one
the
that
oil
starts
spill
when you pull the
mechanic.
Fight, and that means which was
gotta set out the
hand-kiting.
word
I know
oil?
it's called that, but in the Guild Wars 2 community, they call it oil. They are wrong, they are incorrect, they are disturbed individuals, and it will always be defiled from now until the end of time. That is what it's going to be.
This is
This
literally
fight was
what
great.
it looks
This fight
like.
was really, really great. Once we started maximizing our DPS a little bit more and started to actually get comfortable so we weren't losing people along the way due to tiredness. Oh my god! That has to be defiled.
Very
Stay out of it.
short-lived, though. It's probably the most grotesque boss they've ever done. Just look at it. Look at all the arms.
Oh, God, I died.
This is the sort of shit that you see in Dark
dead.
Souls or Divinity Original Sin.
That
Or
brings
any
us to
dark
the end of
fantasy
the first
RPG.
raid in Guild Wars 2. It has been an amazing adventure. It doesn't end there. I have finished Heart of Thorns now.
Very
but I'm
handy
absolutely
friend.
continuing to play this game. Honestly, if you are into MMOs of any sort and you have just judged Guild Wars 2 like I did, I'm not blaming you, as just another WoW clone or an FF14 copy, you're missing out. This game is well worth checking out, and so much of it is free. It's well worth it.
Guild Wars 2 came out in 2012. Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn came out in 2013.
The Zera encounter, the Demos encounter, the Slothazor. These are great raid encounters that would fit, even though it was made all those
Zera,
years ago, in
yes.
like
Slothazor is
2016, They would
garbage.
fit cleanly into modern day raiding in any other game, and I am super impressed with what they did. The problem is, it looks like,
Not
to
changing
me,
my mind about
being
that.
honest, that a lot of the design reeks of desperation. Not a lot of people were playing it. We only found this out after we finished the raid.
I believe
raid
that.
participation in Guild Wars
I
2
believe that
was
not many people are raiding.
really low. And so they try to reinvent the wheel every single raid win.
It's just like with World of Warcraft. Barely anybody are raiding in World of Warcraft.
Honestly, not a harsh criticism. I see why they did it, but it does lead to a lot of confusion. The difficulty curve is all over the place. Some bosses are super easy, even though they should be hard. Some bosses
That's true.
are easy,
That's very
hard,
true.
But they should be easy. And we also have these weird ideas where I think
That's something that I am very appreciative about Final Fantasy XIV, is that the difficulty curve is completely standardized. You expect every single boss at, you know, normal difficulty to be almost the exact same difficulty. There may be some variations here and there, but for the most part, you know what you are expecting. with the Guild Wars 2 raids, they're all over the place. Raid 7 is considered to be one of the easiest raids, for crying out loud, and Raid 6 is the hardest? Question mark?
There's a lot to learn from what Guild Wars 2 did here. They tried everything.
He'll
Reminds me very
probably
much
love
of WoW's
Kadim.
TBC design, where they threw
Yeah.
everything at the wall, something stuck.
He loves,
some
you
things were just
know,
complete
completely
misses.
noisy
That's what
fights,
I
it
see in the
seems.
first
I
attempt
hate
at raiding
Kadim.
in Guild Wars 2.
Raid
I can't
6
wait to
Kadim.
see where they go with this next.
Raid
If you're not
7
trying this
Kadim was a
game,
lot better.
It's well worth it. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.
All right, well, I mean, I agree with him on probably half the points he made in the video, but the other half, you know, as someone who is very much a casual raider, I just disagree on some of these points. I'm sure a lot of hardcore gamers, a lot of sweaty gamers, you know, will probably agree with him. I very much want to know what his opinions are going to be for the strikes and some of the later designed encounters, circa, you know, pre-End of Dragons and End of Dragons. Because those are very well-designed fights. Because I feel like ArenaNet, you know, has been observing Final Fantasy XIV quite a lot, and, you know, they've been learning from them. In terms of, you know, trying to provide visual clarity with their mechanics and, you know, making them intuitive.